Hello, my name is Dr. Anna Maria Mihaicha. I am the president of A Medical LLC, the author of the book Light Medicine, A New Paradigm, the Science of Light, Spirit, and Longevity. And today I am interviewing again my friend and colleague, Dr. Karen Johnson. He's the quantum biologist and the CEO of Quantum Technologies Unlimited. He has developed a new model of science that is a new unified field theory, and it establishes a novel way of looking at the basis of science, as well as the basis of humanity, not from a carbon-based perspective, but from a more hydrogen-based perspective and water-based perspective. Hello, Karen, and I'm so excited to see you again. And can you explain a little bit this new context, and also how are you combining the model of science with the science of spirit? Because that is such an important question. How can we recognize the signature of spirit in the subatomic particle structure, zero point energy? How does it apply to us? And why is it relevant to the future of science to recognize this new model?
That's some big questions, Anna.
Yes.
Okay, so the standard model that science has teaches a physical world, teaches a world that's external to the observer, and teaches that we're based, our biochemistry is based on carbon. Okay, so that's the past. Okay, that is a thinking that is, I would say, incredibly short-sighted and has been, I guess, created through the act of measurement. And science has all been about, proving things by measuring. Okay, so there's so much information. In a sense, you could say the devil's in the detail, right? And if you look at the detail of the standard model and what carbon looks like from standard model of physics, it says there are 6 protons, 6 electrons, and 6 neutrons in carbon in that standard model. So we all know that the number 666 is got some pretty serious connotations. So the physical external reality that science has created through the act of measurement has created a model of 666 for carbon. And it's saying that we are based on carbon and that our biochemistry is all about carbon for generating energy. So why do they say that? Well, if you think about glucose, okay, it's a 6 carbon sugar. It's also got oxygen in it, and it's also got hydrogen in it. Okay, so the idea that carbon gets broken down in this process called glycolysis, and then the Krebs cycle, and then the electron transport chain to generate ATP. If we have a look more closely, what is actually happening in that process, hydrogen is actually being harvested. The harvesting of hydrogen ends up producing NADH and FADH2. And it's those two molecules that are going into the electron transport chain in the mitochondria. It's the hydrogen that is being used to generate a proton gradient. And it's an ATPase enzyme that uses that proton gradient to generate ATP and water. So all of your breaking down of sugar, of fats, of proteins, all those catabolic processes are all about generating a hydrogen gradient in your body, in the mitochondria, to generate ATP and water. CO2 is released. CO2 is a byproduct, right? So our bodies are predominantly water. If you look at how much water is in the body, in the brain, it's around 85%. It's a huge amount, right? So thinking that we are carbon-based life forms when we are predominantly oxygen and hydrogen is really pretty short-sighted. Okay, so I went from that concept of the external world, the 5% that is known in science, to an internal world, a world of light that I see. So how did I do that? How did I make that leap? Well, you could say I started by understanding the limitations of sight, how my eyes worked, how they have inverted retina and that the retina are pointed inward. And so when you close your eyes and you dream at night, the light you're seeing is actually being produced by your subconscious mind.
That's so beautiful. Oh my God. Yes.
Okay. Your eyes are limited by the evolutionary process that has occurred to create them.
Yeah.
So the retina are an extension of the brain. They come out from the brain.
Yes.
So the original eye was like a pinhole camera, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so a pinhole camera turns everything upside down. It's inverted. So the idea that the lens has been developed in order to restore the functional geometry back to the right orientation provides context for why the the lens was developed. So the understanding that the retina and the cones and rods and the retinal molecule cis-trans isomerization, so changing from one structure to another as it interacts with light, acts as a switch, a light switch. So that light switch and how it operates is slow, right?
Okay.
Slower than the speed of light. So it needs time to recover. So not only are our eyes slow, and we used to have these things called PAL TVs or NTFC. That was like what, 29 frames per second. PAL TV was 25 frames per second. And you thought each single frame was continuous. And the reason for that is the eye integrates information very slowly. So a lot of information is lost and we're deceived by time because of that.
So what you're saying is that we see with the brain, and that there's an editing process going on in which a vast amount of information we do not perceive because our brain is not able to compute it.
Well, our brain is computing it. Our subconscious mind is actually taking all the information and creating the observation from that. Part of that information that it is producing, the retina can observe.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so let me step you through that in a very slow and deliberate way. Okay.
Please.
Okay, so light comes from objects surrounding us.
Okay.
Okay, it comes into our being in through the eye or other sources, depending on the wavelength. Some light will be able to interact with us and some light will not. Okay, so where it interacts, it's called the photoelectric effect. Okay, so if you look at Einstein's photoelectric effect, you can see that the light released from an object, those wavelengths that can be observed correspond to the frequencies of light that are not used by that object. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, if you think something is orange, we know that white light is all the colors of the rainbow,
Mm-hmm.
Why do we see it as orange? Because the transition of the electron-positron pairing within that object corresponds to the emission of a wavelength of light corresponding to the wavelength length of orange. So it's what isn't used that we observe.
Okay.
Okay, so when you then transfer that concept into monoatomics or single atoms, okay, so we live in this 3D, three-dimensional reality. So when you have a single atom, you can place it into a hexagon of our neurotransmitter, dopamine. Okay, when it's sitting in that hexagon structure, it has on one side an electron, on the other side a positron.
Yep.
Okay,
Matter
so
and
it's,
antimatter.
yes, both in atoms.
Okay.
So we haven't lost antimatter at all.
Right.
I'll get to the reason for that thinking shortly. Okay. Okay. So when light comes along, the pair jump up from one orbital layer and then they go back down. When they come back down, that work done releases the photon of light. So we have to understand how photons are comprised of an electron and a positron. So light is matter antimatter pairing.
Yep.
It has no mass, it has no charge. It has a geometry of inverted symmetry. So inversion means 1 over that equals the opposite, right? It's an inverted reality. In our biology, because our retina are pointing in, this side of the brain is controlling the other side of the body. We have in a sense, a crossover point within the mind itself. We have inversion of observation. So these atoms, single atoms that can interact with light, jumping up and down as they're doing that, depending on what wavelengths they produce and what orbital layer they are at. If they are at n equals 2, the second layer, when they go up and down, their wavelengths correspond to visible wavelengths of light. Okay, so in the neurotransmitters, there are single minerals, single atoms of minerals that do this dance to produce visible wavelengths that the human retina are observing.
Yep.
Okay, so I discovered this photofenton system. When that single atom is iron, the light can actually allow that iron to be photoreduced, changed from Fe3 plus to Fe2 plus. Then it can react with hydrogen peroxide to produce a hydroxy radical. It's got a half-life of 1 nanosecond, 1200 electron volts. It hydroxylates the aromatic ring. So here we have a way of taking that atom, if it is iron, putting hydroxyls around the ring structure. If you keep doing that, all of a sudden you can break the ring open and release the atom.
So isn't that the same concept that is used by scientists, for example, who are endeavoring to tap zero-point energy systems? And what they're using are plates of metals that are spaced very, very closely, 1 millimeter apart. They have water in that electrolysis, then they have electricity, and what happens is nano bubbles of water are being created in the shape of a torus with a torsion field in it that's creating a laser light of UV light, but it's actually tapping 0 point energy, and they have over unity, meaning they're producing more energy output than is put in. So the idea is, and for me as a doctor, that's very interesting in terms of, well, how do we regenerate a biological system, a body, which is not just by giving somebody stuff, but if we are light and energy beings and we're
Yeah.
able to access that 0 point energy inside the body, enhance the electrical conductivity in all cells, you are age reversing that organism, because the electricity available for regeneration can upregulate all health promoting genes, downregulate all disease promoting genes, and you have effective age reversal. What do you think
Yeah.
about that?
The origin of the initial energy for reducing the iron from Fe3 plus to Fe2 comes from blue light or UVA. So we go from 3.57 electron volts of energy up to 1200 electron volts of energy.
Wow.
And that happens in a nanosecond.
That's amazing. You're saying you can heal the body in a nanosecond?
Well, the Holy Spirit can.
Well, so be that. The Holy Spirit can. That's awesome.
Yeah. That hydroxy radical, right? As it's breaking the bonds in that ring structure with that atom in the middle, there's a few other things that can happen. Okay, I'll
Yeah.
explain. So as it's one way of going is it gets broken down into small molecules, dihydroxyacetone, methyl glyoxyl. There's a biochemical pathway called glyoxylase, and that glyoxylase pathway takes methyl glyoxyl through to lactate, and lactate's a great source of energy for neurological tissue. Okay, so that's one part of the biochemical process that's happening.
And methyl glyoxide, there were studies of scientists several, decades ago that showed that methyl glyoxide was a substance that could cure cancer. Very interesting. And there are
Yeah.
some people who use the Fenton pathway, the iron-based pathway, and are saying, this is a major aspect of cancer physiology, because basically, it's interfering with energy production in the cells, etc. And if you access that Fenton pathway or the iron pathway, that you would have possibilities to reverse cancer etiologies.
Yep. So the only difference between the immortality associated with stem cells and the immortality associated with cancer cells is what?
Well, I mean, one is that it's made to destroy the body, and but they're both pluripotent. They can live,
They're
forever.
both
But
using the
one,
same energy system.
the cancer cell has very low energy utilization, or the ATP is they're not using the oxidative pathway versus
No,
the
they're
stem cells
using the
are.
Fenton pathway, they're using the glyoxylase system, and they're actually generating their energy using this system. The only problem with a cancer cell is that it's adapted to survive when it should really undergo apoptosis and die,
Yes.
right? The failure of death in that apoptotic pathway leads to the accumulation of damage through radicals, which then leads to the cell deciding it wants to live and go and invade and create a whole new being, right? Without taking any regard for the being that is evident and present.
Yes.
So, in a sense, cancer and the failure of undergoing apoptosis leads to that proliferative disease.
Yes.
Yeah. So, the technology of hydroxy radicals is the technology of apoptosis within the cell.
Got it. So you're saying that by accessing the technology of the hydrogen pathway, the hydroxy pathway, you would be able to also eradicate cancer cells, but on the same way you would also be able to regenerate the body and allow it a prolonged lifespan, healthy lifespan.
Yes.
I love it.
So if you understand the production of apoptotic bodies,
Yes.
yeah, in apoptosis, the generation of the hydroxy radical and how radicals go from one molecule to another, to another, to another, to another. Think about it like a needle and thread. They're being stitched together, they're being quantumly entangled so that when those apoptotic bodies go to all the different cells around the body and get taken up, it's a communication system to make sure that everything's quantumly communicating and working as one together.
Yes.
So the loss of that communication system leads to cancer. The loss of quantum entanglement in the body through apoptosis generated by hydroxy radicals leads to cancer.
Wow.
Okay, so antioxidants and the last 60 years of saying that antioxidants are good for our bodies has led to the destruction of the hydroxy radical, has led to the destruction of all the radical based pathways that are occurring within our bodies that our bodies have evolved from. So in a sense, we've got everything reversed back to front. And hence the reason why I've gone to inverted retina, seeing the universe within me to understand how to look at everything back to front, which is actually the correct way around, because science has taught the illusion of an external physical world.
Got it. And so what you're saying is then, so an antioxidant is an electron donor, donor of electricity. But there's a difference in the biophysical system because we have coherence and incoherence. It's known that in biophysics, a coherent biological field with high energy levels is able to express health. When we're losing light, biophotonic light, you have a
Yeah.
breakdown of health, and that actually then is the precursor of disease. So the ultimate change here in the scientific model is that we are beings of light first, and that
Yes.
the matter that we are animating through our consciousness, the harmony of our thoughts, that is actually observing quantum potentials that are, manifesting into reality and thereby, affecting us. Why, for example, is it possible that somebody who is depressed, who's anxious, etc., it's been proven that their telomere length, which is associated with, their survival and their health, are significantly shortened. So depression and anxiety, which causes incoherence in the biological system, cause disease and ill health. So what you're saying also is that the light from within us, the spiritual being that inhabits this material body, is
Yeah.
in control of the body. That's in full coherence with Peter Garayev's model of saying basically the word is the gene. The word creates the DNA. The thought is our biological,
Okay.
makeup.
I'm going.
And
I'm going to go deep now. Okay.
okay, go
So,
ahead.
okay. We'll go back to that single atom in dopamine residing there. Okay. For me, memory. Okay. Short-term memory requires water. Water's come from the food we've eaten through those biochemical pathways, ATPase, generation of ATP in water, hydrogen connecting with oxygen. Okay, that water can transfer the proton through light, the hydrogen, travels onto an amine. Okay, so in dopamine, we have an NH2, right? The structure of the ring, and then it has an NH2 group.
Yep.
When the NH2 group becomes protonated, that means it gets a hydrogen attached to it. It goes to NH3 plus.
Yep.
Okay. The hydrogen on the geometry of the cross. So this is when that kind of spiritual connection is being brought forward. Okay. Christ on the cross, Passion of Christ, falls 3 times. In that atomic structure, we have 3 hydrogens. The hydrogen is in a position that it can deliver hydrogen through quantum tunneling into the monoatomic mineral. The monoatomic mineral, when it gets and receives hydrogen from water through amine to the monoatomic, creates an isotope. That isotope is unstable. It has a half-life. The half-life of that isotope is specific to that isotope, to that atom. When you go to sleep at night and you close your eyes, your body wants to return the number of protons and the number of neutrons back to an even amount in your monoatomic system in the subconscious mind. When it does that, a quark flips from up to down or down to up, releasing a photon of light that you're seeing as your dreams at night.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's coming from the ability of hydrogen to be the only quantum atom in the periodic table, allowing it to be added to monoatomic systems coordinated to our neurotransmitters. Okay, so now we have a light-based hydrogen system for creating atoms through physics within the mind. So light first to create structure.
Yes.
Grows those atoms up the periodic table. They get more and more hydrogen put in. What does hydrogen contain? Well, 1 proton and 1 electron. What's in a proton? 3 quarks, 2 up, 1 down. What's in a neutron? 3 quarks, 2 down, 1 up. What's a photon of light? Up and down. A proton, 2 up, 1 down, plus the electron, right, in hydrogen. So we're dealing with 4. 2
But the
by
basis,
2.
the basis is always the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, however you want to call that, which is, the geometry of the triad is the birthing of all matter
Well,
and
it goes from 2 by 2. The animals go in 2 by 2 in Noah's Ark. The 2 positron and electron is a pair, it's a photon. Quantum tunneling can only occur when hydrogen has no mass and no charge, when it's in a state of quantum tunneling, when the animals are going in 2 by 2. So in a sense, it goes from 2 by 2 to 3 to 1. That is the transformation, and it goes through a radical transition from light into a geometry that allows the Trinity to be created.
so isn't quantum tunneling the technology of time travel that actually you are able to travel? So what you're saying is that at night we're being reset in time in a neutral that kind of dissolves the past and allows a blank slate so we can create the
But
future.
remember the quark flipping to get back to stable again has changed which atoms are present. It
So I'm in a
changed the
parallel
physics.
universe.
Well, that releases the light, and they're the dreams that you're observing at night. So we're growing based on during the daytime, having daytime biochemistry, using hydrogen from food, from light to create structure. Then in the mind at night, nighttime biochemistry turns on, which is all about regeneration, healing, returning back to balanced symmetry, inverted symmetry.
Mm-hmm.
Every action having an equal and opposite reaction. So the restorative function at nighttime through hydroxy radicals, through the generation of melatonin as a great quencher for hydroxy radicals. So our apoptotic death regeneration system is built into that quantum entanglement distribution of all that information throughout the body in order to create what we need to create, where we need to create it, to create a holistic being.
So is there an immortality gene?
Well, when you go in time travel
Yes.
and you go back 13.8 billion light years and you see He, the Father, you understand that there are 16 electrons. All your electrons are immortal. So when you live in the physics of your body, you become immortal. If you live in the biology of the body, you live and die through the biology.
Got it. So if you are aware as the spiritual being that you are, which is without time, without space, it just is, it has always been, then you are immortal. If you maintain that state in the body, you're turning on the information of that immortality. So what you're saying is that immortality, longevity, etc., it is not something, a substance that you'd ingest. It is a state of mind that we obtain, and it's based on the physics of the universe, basically zero point energy. You call it the Father, the divine principle, the quantum, the mind
Yeah.
of God.
Yeah, you become your God. In essence, you align to the universe because you understand how the universe works and you live by those principles.
That is so beautiful. I just want to say that you're one of the greatest geniuses I've ever had the privilege of talking to. I love it.
Thank you. And you found me.
No kidding. So tell me a little bit more about what is your understanding of the 666. We see a lot in the world now about carbon footprint, about, carbon, this
Yeah,
destruction of the earth, etc. And what I'm actually advocating and saying is that if we come back to a science that honors nature, Victor Schauberger, who looked at water, on how to actually access zero point energy, the regeneration of water, the harmony of the human being in harmony with nature, that if we switch the paradigm of science to be respectful of our origins that are divine, and that is the true physics of the future,
yeah,
then we are leaving the carbon footprint and our idea of the carbon being behind the 666, and we are
yeah.
transitioning into the physics of the light being that is in harmony with divine creation, which is nature everywhere.
Spot on.
Okay.
Look, I see three models, right? I see the science-based model that you get taught, and that's the physical external world, and that's the illusion that is talked about. Um, then there's the light body, yeah, making your Merkaba. Uh, if you look at those single atoms, and then you look at how cosmology is studied, Fraunhofer lines, that's those dark lines of the spectrum where the transition of the electron and positron pair have moved and shot the light somewhere else so that it's lost in the spectrum that we receive. We can tell which atoms are present in the stars, right? So the Fraunhofer lines, in a sense, gives us our rainbow light body.
Okay.
Okay, so when you look to understand how an enzyme works, right? I'm a biochemist, enzymologist. That's what I've been trained in my PhD.
Yes.
I did my work on serine proteases. They have one atom of calcium. Okay, so I went and looked. There are 27 different isotopes of calcium.
Wow.
Okay, so when you go and compare the rate of enzyme reaction versus the isotope stability based on half-life, you can marry them up and actually say the light that's traveling through, because this is a charged relay of hydrogen 5,000 times a second, the light that's traveling through is based on the instability of that calcium atom being able to transfer light at that speed into the enzyme to make it catalyze the reaction. So we understand the idea of a physical thing because that's what we're taught. But in a sense, nothing is physical. We have to move that thinking in order to come up with a new way of speaking, a new way of acting and understanding how hydrogen can be taken and put into an atom and can be taken out of an atom. So the memories that you have that all of a sudden come out of the blue is based on the half-life of the atom that has basically held all that information in there.
Mm-hmm.
So when it's released, the memory is returned. So memories are created in the very physical structure of our being.
Yes.
So when
So
you're holding on to memory, remember everything's coming through water, through amines, through into atomic structure via our atomic machines, which are our neurotransmitters. So they're creating the structure through that process.
So there are quantum physicists who said that the past does not exist because basically it's the memory that is encoding it in it. And you're saying exactly the same thing, that as soon as I come into the present moment, the past disappears neurologically in my brain through the chemistry of hydrogen, and that I am now able to, if I cast my mind to the future, to process other thoughts. And that would also explain, for example, more spiritual experience. You were saying that, the rods are turned towards the light of the subconscious mind, so people are starting to see, flashes of blue light, orb entities, things like that, that are of a higher dimensional space. We're not
Well,
crazy, we are
no, not
opening
crazy at
up.
all. What's happening is that the conscious mind is trying to catch up to the subconscious. Subconscious, driven by photophenton, happens at a billionth of a second. When you hit it, when they align, you get through the doorway, and that's time travel. You get to see essentially all the holes line up, and you get to perceive future and past all at once. But for me, that to push me into that state, that happened at the midpoint of my life, which gave me the philosophical understanding of how to see the half-life of an atom and its role that it plays in the restoring of memory and the release of memory.
That's so
But
interesting.
I had,
So
okay,
I
so
had a similar experience, Karen, in my near-death experience, where I actually was aware in multiple parallel realities at once, and I became aware that I was both dead and alive, and that as I was aware in this reality, and I was affirming, my own healing, and that my mind is future now, and that I'm downloading the future, all of the realities simultaneously changed. Didn't matter how far away in the past or in the future they were all now. So to understand that right now we're affecting the past and the future in the present, and
yeah,
have that alignment if we are in the now, is absolutely integral, I think, to the future of science and to the future of humanity.
yeah, when you collapse the wave function, right? So the ability to do time travel is the ability to see the singularity, right? So when you understand how to change the mathematics of quarks from the standard model of 2/3 up, positive charge, negative 1/3 down, negative charge, adding them together in the standard model to get +1 for a proton and a 0 for a neutron, you change that. I change that model to inverted symmetry. If it's up, it's -1. If it's down, it's +1. And I multiply and always get 1. Protons +1 up, neutrons -1 down. Restoring 0 into the neutron required me to add the positron +1 back in. So I have a positron and electron. I have light geometry within atoms. Having that light-based inverted symmetry, no mass, no charge, allowed me to then come to the point of, if the standard model of science has been based on measurement, I'm going to create a model based on logic without measurement in order to then allow the universe that I'm working with to return back to the point of balance and symmetry so that it's one thing before measurement is made based on logic. And
It's
then being able to use that understanding of the one thing that is there prior to measurement, change the starting position, go away, come back, observe, the position's changed. Learning how to use 0 point energy field, the fact that it wants to return to balance and symmetry, to drive the direction of the research that I'm doing. So I use zero field in creating products that I make. So I have no need to put energy into them at all. It's created by zero field energy.
It's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And it is the returning of the one. What does that mean? The one is that field from which all things come, in
Yeah.
which we observe, in which we are grounded in, from which we come from. So we come from God, we are divine. Everything is God. There's no such thing as anything that isn't God.
Right.
And the physics is exactly what you're saying. The words are inadequate no matter what language you use, whether that's the scientific language or the
Yeah.
spiritual religious language.
Yeah.
It's just trying to explain something that's inexplicable, but in that we are the one.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Karen. I am just blown away as always, and it's fantastic to talk to you. And we will continue these conversations. And as we are sharing these views and what you've experienced and how to integrate this in a new model of science, this is how things change, and we bring what you're saying, the future, into the now, because the
Yeah.
science of the future is based on exactly what you're saying. And we have to combine spirit back into the science. Spirit has a science. It is based in quantum physics and 0 point energy fields, all
Well,
of what you're
if
explaining.
you look at quantum physics and what it
Yes,
really is, it's a wave model.
yes, a
And
model of light.
yeah, that is an inverted symmetry wave model, right?
Yes.
So they use probability and statistics. I've just chosen to have that model at Planck scale, which removes time, removes mass, removes charge because of it being in that geometry of inverted symmetry of light. So no mass, no charge, no time allows time travel.
That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm going to post your contact at the video, and we're going to talk soon. And so appreciate it.
You're welcome.